This, ladies and gentlemen, is football.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Total A-Leagues. I'm Vince Rugari. Tommy Oar, how are you?
Very good, great to be back.
Good to have you back, mate. Good to crack into another weekend of A-League action. I don't know about you, one of my favourites of the season, to be honest, so far, Tommy. A couple of the games that we're going to break down, I thought were really entertaining, but also high quality, particularly Wanderers Western United, which we'll get to a little bit later.
Yeah, no, it was great. Good crowds too.
Yeah, fantastic. Came across well on TV. And the top six race is...
very alive.
Exciting, man. It's good, that we have this league structure for this reason.
And
you know what I mean?
It's been a long time since it's been this close, this many teams competing for the finals. So it's it's awesome.
Yeah. We'll start though by talking about Sydney FC at the moment. Obviously, huge expectations on them coming into this season. They're still alive in the league, Tommy. Still could play finals and still very much alive in the Asian Champions League too. They got a huge game tonight against Lion City Sailors, a 2-0 deficit to overturn in the Asian Champions League too. And to talk about that, we've got on their CEO, Mark Aubrey. Mark, thanks for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Great to be here, guys.
How big's this one, Mark, for not only the team but also the club to hopefully be in a home Champions League final?
Absolutely massive. I think it is probably one of the biggest games in the club's history, if not the biggest game in the club's history, and the opportunity to host a Champions League final in Sydney, should we make it through to the final, I think is something that is a huge opportunity for our club.
Mark, I want to ask you, looking more big picture at how you would assess kind of the club's season so far. Obviously, there was a lot said in pre-season. I think a lot of people probably had you as favourites for the A-League, and you've done really well in the Asian Champions League, been a little bit ups and downs in the league, but still obviously very alive in that. How would you assess the performance of the club so far this season?
I think that is the assessment. It has been up and down. I think it is difficult to travel. I think it's testament to the job that the Central Coast Mariners did last year when you are competing in Asia and, having a busy travel schedule between the league and managing the commitments of Asian Champions League football with the local league. It's difficult. I think that's not an excuse, though. I think we've got a lot of quality. We've got a lot of quality through the youth that we've got on the bench as well. So I think it has been a little bit disappointing. It's probably characterised by inconsistency more than anything else. We do believe our best football beats anyone, though. We believe that beats anyone in both Asian Champions League and in the A-Leagues. And if we can put it together, particularly with a great tight finals race coming up, we believe we can go pretty deep in both Champions League and in the A-League this season.
Mark, with regards to Velupillay, the coach, he's under a fair bit of pressure, you'd have to say, from some section of the supporter base. I'm assuming, though, that the club is still firmly behind him, and I guess the ethos he's brought as well. He's spoken to us on this show before about the style that he wants to play with Sydney FC and how he feels like a club like Sydney FC should be playing front foot football. I guess that's something you guys are fully behind.
We are. Look, at Sydney FC, our model or our football DNA is the philosophy that sits behind the club. We're club-centred. It's not coach-centred. So we would go into kind of bringing a coach into that position based on the way we do want to play. And that philosophy is front foot. It's dominant. It's proactive football. But it is high intensity, and it requires a spread of players right across the pitch playing their roles. We're behind Uffy again. I touched on the fact that we believe our best football beats anyone in the league, and I think Uffy's shown when that comes together, it doesn't just get us results, but it's super entertaining to watch. So yeah, we still have a lot of faith in the journey that we're on and the pathways that we have coming through with the current team, but also the youth players sitting in behind it.
Mark, I want to ask you, obviously, about, you've got a good record of kind of producing young players. We've seen Hayden Matthews recently get a good transfer overseas. Sydney FC is obviously known as a club that likes to bring in the kind of big marquee names and these types of things. How do you kind of navigate that balance between, giving young players opportunities and kind of going for the big names that maybe draw the crowds and these types of things? Because it seems like a fine line to get right.
Yeah, it is a fine line to get right, but I do believe that it's part of the future strategy for sustainability for the football club is getting that balance right. I think if you look at the history of our academy, I think some 60-odd players have come through our academies into professional contracts. But if you look at the amount of those players that Sydney FC got a commercial benefit from, it's actually a really small amount of it. And then we've shown in the last couple of years through Jake Gilwood-Reich, Yazbek, through Hayden Matthews as well this year, that there is a huge commercial return for us finding that balance between being competitive and winning trophies. With Sydney FC, that is definitely our expectation, to still be in the mix to win trophies and to be competitive, but then finding that balance of the pathways of what is a best-in-class academy, ensuring we're bringing those kids through, giving them game time, having them add to our squad, but then complementing them with marquees or mature players. And it's not a perfect balance. It's still a balance that we're learning ourselves in terms of kind of where that balance lies between the marquees and your more mature players, and then your pathways through. But it's one where we'll continue to evolve and continue to lean in, because it's a huge opportunity, not just for our club, but I think it's a great opportunity for clubs right across the A-League.
Mark, the other end of it, the marquees. I imagine Sydney FC every off-season get a whole bunch of names that come across the club's desk, big names that you could potentially look at. How did you know that Douglas Costa would be the right rein to pull? And just how good has he been for the club? We can see on the field, but off the field, what do you think he's done for you?
Yeah, it comes back to that same football philosophy and football DNA piece. We want to ensure that we've got players that will fit into that system first and foremost. Someone that is a really big name but isn't going to suit the way that we play isn't ever anyone that we would look at. So I think with Douglas, initially it was that we felt that he could fit. He still had hunger in the belly. He wanted to prove that he still had, world-class football in him. And I think he's shown that in the league this year. And so that's the first path for us, that we need to ensure that it's someone that's going to add to us, not just off the pitch, but on the pitch. But then on the second half of that, what Douglas has given to our football club off the pitch has been incredible. He is just an unbelievable guy. He's the last person to leave the stadium after pretty much every game. He hangs out with kids at Sky Park all the time. He's always hanging around taking photos, here and away as well. He's just been a phenomenal asset for our club on the pitch and off the pitch. We couldn't be happy with him.
Mark, I want to ask you specifically about the long-term kind of plan for the club in regards to the women's team, because obviously, unfortunately, missed out on finals this season for the first time in a long time. There's been a lot said about the fact that the manager's not a full-time appointment. Is there any kind of strategy from the club to make that a full-time appointment anytime soon?
Oh, look, I think it's something that we continue to look at right across the women's game. I think there continues to be a missed opportunity for the league broadly around the women's game coming out of the World Cup. I really think that we should be bolder in building a strategy whereby the Australian League is one of the top leagues in the world. I think we've proven that we can produce world-class women's talent here. And I think that how we lean into that as a code to ensure that, probably behind the WSL and the NWSL, how do we become the best women's league in Asia that doesn't just attract high-quality talent here, but actually attracts some of the Matildas back home to play on the shores here. And I think that is a massive opportunity for us. And it does start with the professionalisation of the game that I hope as a code we are taking steps towards. It's been a disappointing year for us this year, but it's also a year where it's been plagued by injuries and a few issues as well that we're confident that we'll sort out. But I think that there is still so much opportunity around the women's game that we're not fulfilling, and leading into the Asian Cup next year, I think there's a huge opportunity around that for us, not just as Sydney FC, but as a code and as a league.
Fingers crossed for you tonight, Mark. Thanks for your time and jumping on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolute pleasure, and thank you.
Tommy, people will, have differing opinions, I think, on Wolfie and the job he's doing. But I like what I heard there in terms of a club-centric approach, because for me, too many A-League clubs over the years have put their entire identity in a coach. And coach will play this style of football, and so the squad eventually gets moulded to that style of football, and then they decide we want to change, we want to go with this guy. This guy plays differently. It takes time to transition the squad from that way to the other way. More clubs need to do that, I think. Whatever the identity is, you can pick whatever one you want, but stick with it, because that helps you build. Exactly,
and I think that, if things weren't to work out with Wolfie, for example, this season, and they, were not to get the results they expected, the expectations for the new coach coming in would be very clear. So I think that, that blueprint has served them well in the past, and I think that, they're probably one of the leading examples in the league of a club that's doing that really well.
Yeah. Tonight, What do you think? I mean, they just got to go for it right from the start. 2-0 down.
And 2-0's a dangerous scoreline. I think that if Sydney FC can get an early goal, get the crowd behind them, that we know how good they are in the front third. I think that this game is very much, they're capable of turning this around. And the disappointing thing last week, I think, aside from the scoreline, was the performance. I thought that was probably one of their worst performances of the season. But I think that they showed on the weekend in the first half against Auckland, they're capable of scoring and producing good moments. So, they're again, more than capable. It's just a matter of if they turn up.
Tommy, domestically, Sydney FC, in better nick than they might have been, to be honest. 1 point clear in the top 6 race. A little bit of breathing room over an Adelaide team that, the bottom seems to have fallen out of them. What do you think after the game on the weekend, though? 2-2 with Auckland. Douglas Costa on the bench for the whole thing. They looked all right, I guess, and then they looked a little bit shaky at the back. Story of the season, really.
Yeah, I think especially if you look at the circumstances, obviously a short turnaround from their midweek ACL game, and obviously playing again this week. So when you look at that, I'm not surprised that they decided to rest a couple of the older players, but they've got a stacked squad, and I think that if any squad in the league is kind of equipped to deal with that, it's them. I thought first half they were quite good, quite positive, and I think that, second half from kind of the 60th minute onwards, I think they looked like a tired team, and a team that had just played a few days earlier. So, I think that kind of allowed Auckland back. The same old defensive frailties that you just touched on that have come back to bite Sydney FC kind of showed again. And I think all in all, a draw was probably a fair result, and at this stage of the season for them, probably a good point.
Did they create enough, do you think, in terms of going forward? Because their 2 goals, we just saw them.
Yeah.
Absolute bombs from Adrian Segacic.
Yeah.
But outside of those...
No, not really, I guess. And I think that, if with no Douglas Costa, I think obviously a change in formation, which we'll touch on. But, I think that they kind of lacked a little bit of cohesion.
Lacking cohesion right there, I think, a little bit, Tommy. We've spoken a little bit about the goalkeeper situation this season.
Well,
I don't understand it, to be honest.
And he's gotten away with that. But if that goes in, that's a disastrous moment, not only for him personally, but for Sydney FC for their season. And, I think that, there's been so many of those moments now, and he's still getting more opportunities to play. They haven't stopped. So it's kind of posing the question, what do the other goalkeepers have to do to get a look in?
Big question. Good question. Yeah. Let's hear a little bit from Adrian Segacic, who was understandably feeling himself after the match.
Yeah, look, I think it's my left foot, it's a sledgehammer, so I know when I've got a few seconds, if I pull that trigger, I back myself to score from anywhere.
There you go.
Loving himself sick at the moment.
Yeah.
Don't blame him. Also, we saw in the highlights before, after the second goal, saying out loud, you can't stop me.
Yeah.
Confidence level's high for the kid at the moment, I guess. Should he just be playing as many minutes as possible for the rest of the season at the moment, do you think?
Well, we spoke about it last week. The games that he has started, when it hasn't gone well, he's always been the scapegoat and been taken off at half-time many times. I think that's been silly. He needs to be given, a run of starting games. And, I think, look at it this way. If he wasn't in Sydney FC's team this season, they would not be where they are. No. Simple as that. So, for me, he's got to play. I think you can fit him, Lolly and Costa in the same team easy, no problems. And, then kind of fill in the gaps around those 3.
Just a quick thing on Segacic, I think he's definitely gone at the end of the season overseas. According to my very rough calculations and somewhat limited, it's a reasonable understanding of the training compensation system. Depending on the club he goes to, Sydney FC could get as much as $1 million in training compensation for him because he's been at the club in the academy system since he's 12 or 13. So you want to be selling him for a bigger amount and with a sell-on fee if possible. Yeah. But if you can't do that, and you can't make a player sign a contract.
That's right.
Because he might want to have the freedom to choose his next destination.
Yeah.
Not a bad second prize, so to speak.
Not at all. And I think that, that's a good return on investment, to be honest. And, he also has helped them be successful so far this season, or hopefully successful for their sake. But, no, I mean, if the alternative's nothing and he walks on a free transfer, I think that they can't really complain about that.
Yeah. And just, we've spoken about this many times, but good overall, just the volume of... The Socceroos always struggled. When the Socceroos aren't going well, the question is, who's scoring, who's creating, who's the striker and all that. And at the moment, you look at the Golden Boot race and it's there's no out and out, there's no McLarens, there's no
it's pretty low scoring.
It's low scoring, and the good thing is the names at the top of the list. Segacic, Bodic, Milanovic, Archie Goodwin.
Yeah.
So in a cycle or two for the Socceroos, that's going to pay some serious dividends. Hopefully these kids all make the right steps for the next phase of their career. But it bodes well.
It does, and I don't think we've seen this for a long time in Australian football. All young players in those positions kind of breaking through, and I think the good thing is it's not only one or two, but because there's so many of them, they're kind of pushing each other, egging each other on. They all want to get the golden boot. They all want to be the next big thing and get into the Socceroo. So having that competition, even though they're not in the same, they're not teammates per se, but potentially in the future teammates, having that kind of drive to want to be the best, I think is healthy.
The Auckland side of it, Tommy, so they're unbeaten in 12 games, funnily enough, but they've got 5 draws in their last 6. They're away to Melbourne Victory this weekend. They're wobbling.
They are.
Why are they wobbling?
Yeah, well, there's two ways to look at it, because Steve Corica said in his press conference after the game as well, obviously they're showing a lot of resilience to not lose games, but I think that particularly with the ball, they're not being as emphatic as they were earlier in the season, and they're probably having to defend for larger periods of the game. So, if you're defending for larger periods in the game, you're more likely to concede goals. I think that their issues largely stem with the ball, and I think that, they're not being as proactive, maybe a little bit more negative with their mindset. And, if you're winning the league by some distance, I think it's a little bit of pressure too. I think you're starting to see that, but, I think that they have dropped a gear from what we've seen at their best, and if they can't refine their best form, I think that it could be a difficult month or two ahead for Auckland.
Do you think they're just getting to the tough bit of the fixtures? I think we spoke as well about they had a pretty comfortable run. A lot of games in New Zealand at the start, a lot of games at home. Their run home is difficult.
And they have been playing, their last, I think it was the last 6 or 7 games, were all the top 6 or 7 teams. So
don't forget as well, I think a lot of their players, and we probably forget this, are in the league for the first time.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the refreshing things about the way they constructed their squad, is they're new faces, and that was exciting. But these players haven't been to Allianz before. They haven't done some of these trips.
And they are racking up the travel kilometres as well, and I think that does have a toll, at this stage of the season. Yeah, I don't know. I think that, they have had a few injuries as well, which hasn't been great in terms of timing for them. But I still think that, Corica, although he's keeping the messaging quite positive, I think that he'd be a little bit concerned about the dip in form for sure.
Quick shout out to the Auckland fans as well, the Port. Tommy, most A-League supporters groups have a designated away game that they try and get big numbers to, and they usually come up with a name for that thing as well.
Yeah.
So Call of Duty or things like that.
Yeah.
I like this one, Port of Call.
Awesome.
Clever, effective, but seriously, for a Kiwi team to bring that many numbers to an away game.
Well, I don't think I've ever seen, travelling fans, that's not a finals game or a derby like that. I think that is, unique. And it's not just about the numbers. It's also about how vocal they are and how much they get behind the team. I think so far for Auckland this season, that's made a huge difference as to why they've been successful as well. Yeah,
let's just see. It's an unforgiving league in a number of ways, the A-League. So, they've got it good at the moment, Auckland. It's been a dream first season for them. Hopefully they all stick around, these fans, for the inevitable tougher times which will come. The struggle will come.
Yep.
It comes for us all in Australian football.
Yeah.
Even them, the Kiwis. It comes for us all in Australasian football, let's say. But no, these are good foundations for them, the club, the culture.
I mean, if you asked or said before the season that this was how it was going to pan out, I think they would have taken it with both hands.
100%.
They've been an absolute revelation. So much positivity around the club. Obviously they had a little bit more relatively of a difficult last month, but haven't lost. So you got to remember that as well. And I think that it's an exciting time to be an Auckland fan.
Could lose though this weekend. Dangerous game, Victory away, don't you reckon? I mean,
very.
Victory I don't know what's happened, but I mean, probably since the Socceroo squad, to be honest. Velupillay and Arzani have been unbelievable.
And I think if you look back at Victory earlier this season, I think that the one thing that everybody was saying about them was how much territorial dominance and how much possession they had, but they weren't clinical in the front third. And if you see that first goal epitomises why they've been so good in the last few weeks, because Arzani, just the way he kind of held the ball up, he's a player that's oozing confidence at the moment, and you just said it, the finish from Velupillay, that's a player at the top of his game. I think with those two in red-hot form, they're a team no one wants to play against, particularly coming into finals time.
They've got a lot to play for those two as well, don't you think? Not only possibility of moves overseas at the end of the season, both of them will be keen for something, but June, there's a huge window for the Socceroos coming up. I imagine if they're both in anywhere near this sort of nick, they'll be a part of it.
Well, absolutely. Obviously, we've seen Velupillay, make his mark on the Socceroos, and Arzani off the bench recently, which was good to see. But I think if Arzani keeps this form up, he'll be pushing or knocking on the door for a starting place in the Socceroos come June. But there's still a lot of football to play this season, and Victory will be needing them at their best.
Just quickly, that goal, shades of Nicky Carl in the early days of the A-League.
Yeah.
How much are we giving him credit for that, and how much are we sort of tut-tutting at the Wellington Phoenix defenders for just letting him do it?
Yeah, well, both, because I think, you have to give him a lot of credit because it was still, a very confident run and great finish, but, I think there'll be question marks around the Wellington defence. Nobody engaged with the ball. He didn't really have to dribble past any players. He just was running into open space whilst the defenders retreated. Someone needed to engage with the ball, but he made them pay, and, that's all we can ask him to do.
Yeah. The boys on the A-League Download had a chat about the Melbourne Victory forward line this week. Let's have a listen to what they had to say.
Let's go to Wellington, everybody. Wellington Phoenix 2, Melbourne Victory 3. What did you make of this one? Backer.
For me, I look at Arzani and I think he's someone that's really stepped up his game after his selection in the Socceroos. And maybe the penny dropped with him a little bit. Popper did have a conversation with him a while back, whether it's a pull your head in type conversation. But he's really taken his game to the next level, and he sets up Velupillay. Fantastic finish from Velupillay as well.
It makes it look so easy. Doesn't it?
But I think for me and for Melbourne, if Arzani's on and he stays in this form, they go deep into the final series. So for me, he's really upped his game over the past month, and if he keeps riding that trajectory, it's only going to get better for the team, right? Because when he's on, he's unbelievable.
Yeah.
The hottest attack in the league, Tom, it's either them or it's the Wanderers, I reckon.
Yeah, well, Wanderers have scored the most goals so far this season. They've been more consistent with it. I think Victory has shown earlier in the season they're capable of doing what they're doing now, but they weren't quite doing it consistently. But, in recent weeks, they've been scintillating up front. I still think there are some question marks defensively around the Victory. Wellington did expose them on a number of occasions, but, all in all, in finals football, if they're playing anything like they have been, in recent weeks, they're going to be tough to beat.
I don't have too many question marks about the Wanderers in general at the moment. So unbeaten in 9. I think 10 is their best run ever as a club. So they're coming up on that. They look unreal. They look unreal at both ends as well. And this game, I think I mentioned it off the top, against Western United was one of the best games I've seen in the A-League for a while in terms of overall spectacle, quality. There's a good number of people in the stands as well, which was great. And Western United weren't bad by any measure.
No, I think this game was both teams were fantastic. This game actually could have gone either way. It was, the scoreline flatters Wanderers, but who were fantastic. But Western United also had their moments, and probably the difference between the two sides just was the clinicalness in front of goal. And, obviously, some fantastic goals, some fantastic opportunities created. But I think Wanderers, the story of them and why they've turned things around.
That one was created by the other mob, by the way.
It's true. But I think that, Wanderers, the reason they've been able to turn things around has been because they've just shored up things defensively. And if you compare now to the start of the season, and how they're defending and the desperation that they kind of have defensively and how much responsibility they're taking as, individually, because even on the weekend we saw Milanovic, for example, make back post clearances. These are players that are showing a lot more defensively than they were at the start of the season, and I think that you've got to give Stadge a lot of credit for that.
Well, that bloke we saw on the megaphone, Alex Gersbach.
Yep.
Did you ever get in a Socceroo squad with him, Tommy?
We didn't overlap, but obviously I remember him from his time at Sydney FC early when he broke through, and he's always been exciting. Obviously had his injury issues, so it's great to see him back in the A-League. Obviously, great performance from him on the weekend and had a good time for the Wanderers as well.
Yeah, a huge addition, I think, to their back four. Great upgrade at left back. A player who I think we're all a little bit disappointed that he didn't hit the heights that we expected him to when he left Australia, but if he can come back a better player with all he's learned in Europe, I wouldn't discount him from the broader Socceroos picture either.
For sure.
And I think the other bloke who's helped stiffen them up at the back is Anthony Pandazopoulos.
Yeah.
Big on the celebrations there, the defensive celebrations. I know you don't feel too good about that sort of stuff, but he's a good story, man. 21 years old. They signed him a couple of years ago from Oakley Cannons in NPL Victoria. Yeah. And when I think about players who have been signed directly from Victorian State League and as a centre-back, my head goes to Sash Oganovsky Adelaide United legend.
Yeah.
Should have played more games for the Socceroos, and an absolute beast.
He was.
Panizopoulos is a potential beast.
He is. He's still so young. I think that was the thing that surprised me, is when I heard how young he was. Yeah, I think he's made a huge difference, and his physicality. Nobody wants to play against players like that. Touching on, obviously as fans, you love to see the players kind of rally and gee up the crowd and celebrate all the little things. But I do think that sometimes Wanderers this season have gone a little bit over the top. We saw it in the derby, when they were doing the big celebrations and it ended up with egg on their face. I don't want to see that happen again.
That's just ex-forward talking, I reckon, man. I love to see that, to be honest. It should matter to them this much,
But
I love it.
Do you need to do that to show that it matters?
Why
It can just matter, and you can just do it.
I think one of the good things about the league at the moment is we've got many players who express themselves in different ways.
We definitely do.
Segicic, Panizopoulos, man. We've got some players who will just put it out there and they don't care.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
It's me.
It's you. You're the problem. Let's hear a little bit from Ali Skursback talking post-match.
You saw the boys tonight in the second half. We didn't play so well, but we fought really hard. A lot of scrambling. Probably not the best defending, leading up to a few chances for Western United. But I think that's a big difference. Scrambling in the box, fighting for our lives, sort of acting like it's a finals game already. And we spoke about it before the game, about this simulating a finals game. And we came out in front of our crowd, good crowd again, and the numbers just keep getting better. And of course it's helping every time. So we just got to keep the momentum going. The two young boys at the back, Panto and Bonners, are driving the old guys, me and Gab on the sides. They're chest pumping each other, and me and Gab are just trying to keep up. But they've been really, really good. And it's something we've been talking about since I arrived, at least. Really sticking together in the back line, keeping the line tight, and scrambling, like I said. And you see, we went to New Zealand and we didn't win for 2 games, but we didn't lose. We put in a big shift over there, and we come back here tonight and we get the 3 points in front of our fans. So it's looking good.
That sort of last-ditch defending for your lives kind of stuff. It's crucial. Finals football, these games coming up, they're all kind of finals. All these teams in the top 6 mix, the finals start already for them, sort of thing. So if they bring that in all their remaining games, they're going to be a hard team to score against.
Absolutely, and you always back them to score. They're the highest scoring team in the comp. Even if they concede 1 goal, I think that, in games, I think teams are going to know they're going to have to score 2 or 3 goals to beat the Wanderers.
Yeah. Another player from there, I'll just mention him quickly. He doesn't have the volume of goals that, the young players were talking about earlier do. But Zach Sapsford, I thought, was really impressive up front. He's a physical beast. He doesn't look like it. He's not the kind of guy you look at him and you're like, you're an intimidating sort of player. But he's got a massive engine. He's big, sort of for his size.
He holds the ball up well. And the thing, he's pretty rounded because he loves to run in behind. We all know that. But the fact that he's such a willing runner and is capable of holding the ball up, he allows the midfielders like Milanovic to catch up, to bring those kind of players into play. He's a really important part of what they're doing. And Brandon Borrello as well. I think those two up front are just a handful to play against.
Yeah, he's a player. So have Western United, have they blown it a little bit, their title hopes? Because they can still do it. They got Brisbane away, Sydney at home, Auckland at home to finish off. But I feel like they needed to get at least a point out of this game, I think, to have any hopes of unseating Auckland.
I think that, that's maybe one kind of stretch too far. I can't see them winning the league from this current position, but, ultimately, in the finals, anything's possible. I think they'll still be looking at that second place because the difference between getting second and third is huge, as we've discussed on this show a few times. So I still think, obviously, Melbourne City's still, got a really difficult game this weekend. I think Western United will be looking to get maximum points, and I think if they can do that, then second's probably as best as it will get for them. I
think we mentioned before, they weren't bad by any means.
Nah, and I think, Ibasuki had that goal line scramble in the second half. If that goes in, it's 1-1.
And if they don't have the mistake from the corner kick as well.
That's right. And John Aloisi, after the game was talking about, he thought the performance was good. And I think he was right. It's easy. The scoreline did flatter the Wanderers. And it's not because I'm saying that because I thought the Wanderers were bad. It's just that I thought the game was very even and actually could have gone either way.
Yeah. Well, let's hear exactly what John Aloisi had to say.
Yeah, I thought that overall we played really well. I thought the first half we didn't create as many chances, but we were building up well. We're just in that final third, we were lacking that end product. We restricted them when they had the ball. They caught us a couple of times on the counter-attack because they're dangerous on the counter. It was disappointing to cop that goal just before half-time because we wanted to tweak a few things. Second half, we were very good. We created a lot of chances. The ball just didn't go in tonight. We've scored so many goals of late, and tonight was one of those nights that the ball didn't want to go on the back of the net, and then they score from a corner that we know that we can do better with. But all in all, pleased with the way the boys performed against a very good side. I thought that were excellent.
Yeah, it's a different game on another day.
Exactly, and I think the performance wasn't disheartening by any stretch, and I think if they play the Wanderers again, which is obviously might happen in the finals, that's one I can't wait to watch.
Yeah. Tommy, usually if a team would win 6-0 in a derby, we'd go off the top of the show with it. Unfortunately for the Mariners and the Jets, they're nowhere near. Well, Jets are still a slight chance of sneaking into the 6, but not this season. Hasn't worked out for either team as they would have liked, but. I know the bottom's falling out a little bit of the Mariners season and the Jets. When you thought the same would happen to them after the announcement of Rob Stanton not staying on, they've just gone...
it's galvanised them.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at the form from this year, this calendar year, Jets are in the 6. So I think that they're a team that's very much on the up. That's why we were surprised to see that Stanton was moved on. But this is a team that's brimming with confidence at the moment, particularly in the front third. If you look at the quality of some of these goals they scored...
Look at that.
Great finishing, great combinations in the front third. And, the Mariners, I think the good thing for the Jets is this has been a long time coming. The Mariners have had the edge over them now for a long time in what is, their kind of rivals down the road. So
I think this was their first win at home in an F3 derby since 2020, so it's been a while.
Exactly, and I think that the fans needed it. The fans needed something to, have a bit of confidence to go into next season and think that there's kind of, light at the end of the tunnel, because I think it's been some tough years for Newcastle, but what a finish that was. Eli Adams obviously had him on the show last week. He's just a player that's gone from strength to strength, and there's some exciting talent there.
Yeah, I think whoever takes over after Rob Stanton has got some, and he said this himself.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think it bears out. They've got a good foundation. You add a couple of high-end, top-quality senior players to this mix of kids.
Completely agree.
I think that's there's something special brewing there, which is exciting for the league and Australian football.
Yep.
Not so exciting, the Mariners, Tommy. Let's hear from Mark Jackson speaking after the match.
Yeah, a little bit embarrassed. Sat here. First and foremost, I want to apologise to our supporters who support us all the time and have come out tonight to watch that level of performance. It wasn't good enough and it's not acceptable, and all I can do is apologise for that and given my word, I'm trying my best to sort it out and make it better for the remainder of the season, albeit two more games and going into next season as well to fix those problems.
Tommy, I personally don't think it's really on Mark Jackson this season. He had one of the all-time seasons at the helm last season, a lot of turnover in the off-season. You live up that way. What do you think has sort of gone wrong there?
Yeah, I think if you look at the players they lost, did they replace them with anything near the quality that they had? No. And so, we spoke about at the start of the season, they obviously started the season quite slowly, and we all said, last year they started slowly, they'll grow into it, but I just think they're 2 or 3 players short of, really giving the season a good crack. I think that, at the even games where they lost, they weren't necessarily poor. I just think that they're a team that's probably not top 6 quality at the moment, and that's not his fault. When we had him on the show a few months ago, it was obviously the transfer window, and he was looking to bring in a few new faces. That didn't really happen. So I think that, this will be a busy off-season for the Mariners.
And a couple of recruitment busts, I think you'd say. Like, a couple of the English players they've brought in just haven't really lived up to the standard, I think. And then Trent Sainsbury, I think, a terrific player, interrupted with injury and just hasn't really got going, I think, this season. So it just hasn't worked out for him on a couple of fronts. Exactly.
And, I think that it's probably the reality check after 2 or 3 unbelievable seasons at the Mariners has probably brought them back down to earth, and I think we're seeing them a team very much in the rebuilding phase.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, Tommy, this next segment might be helpful to Mark Jackson or any other A-League coaches looking at recruitment next season. We've been asked to put together our off-contract 11. So a team of players who are coming off contract at the end of this season, available on free transfers. There's a fair bit on the market, Tommy.
Yeah.
Can you take us through your 11 first of all?
Yep. And it is worth saying, some of these players may have re-signed or signed elsewhere.
We don't know about them.
They haven't been announced, so we're only going off the information available to us. But
On transfermarket.com.
Exactly. So
one of the great resources.
So I have Redmayne in goal. Obviously, he's been on the periphery this season, but
Still can do a job in the A-League, I think, and I think should be doing one at Sydney at the moment,
Agreed.
but that's another story.
And then I have Klur, Kaltak, Alex Grant, and Sutton as the defenders. And I think Garuccio's a little bit stiff to miss out on that.
I have the same back four, except I have Garuccio in.
And the only reason I chose Sutton was an age thing. Obviously a lot younger. Garuccio's towards the end of his career, but still, he's in great form this season. So either of them would be great. I've got Anthony Caceres and Jake Holman as my midfielders. Then the front four, what a front four this is. It's Arzani, Segacic, Yakulis, and Botic.
Yeah, my midfield forward line almost exactly the same. I've just got Bratton in as the second holder next to Anthony Caceres, Holman in the 10, and no Jackalis.
Gotcha.
But there's some mad 11s, to be honest. Like those are some good players on the market. And I don't think, we've said this before, but Segacic, Botic, I think they're going overseas. I don't think they're going to be available to other A-League clubs. But, man, there's some quality there, particularly, I struggle that Caceres is off contract, to be honest.
I know. I mean, if you take him out of that Sydney FC midfield, I think that there's a huge hole to fill. They obviously lost Luke Bratton last season. I think they should be doing whatever they need to do to keep him.
He probably won't go anywhere. He loves the club. But if you're a Mariners or Newcastle and you've got a little bit of dosh lying around, imagine putting Anthony Caceres in that Newcastle team.
Changes the whole picture. And, I think that if you're Sydney FC, are there any Aussie players like Anthony Caceres available? No. And we said the same thing last year about Luke Bratton. He won't leave Sydney FC. He's too comfortable, and he left. So, you can never judge a book or be too presumptuous in this situation. So I think that, that list, there's some great players that teams could pick up.
Just finally, Jake Holman. Tell me a little bit about what you rate about him, because I see a player who can potentially explode in the next couple of seasons and probably doesn't get, because he's at MacArthur, don't talk about, and because they're not having a top season, don't talk about him as much, but we probably should.
No, I played with him obviously at MacArthur, and he was definitely probably the biggest young talent at the club coming through when I was there. I think he's fantastic. He can play on the wing, he can play anywhere in midfield. He's so good on the ball. He's a willing runner. He makes good forward runs, technically very good. Sydney FC youth product is worth saying. So he left Sydney FC to go to MacArthur.
Brother's still there.
Exactly. So good footballing family, sisters play as well. So, I think that he's a player who has a really high ceiling. He's quite experienced for his age too. He has shades of like an Angus Thurgate where, you think, oh, he's actually a lot younger than I thought he was. So I think that he's got a great career ahead of him, and I think MacArthur should be doing everything they can to try and keep him.
There you go. There you go, Tommy. Recruitment is easy. Do it. Yeah. The top six is all set in the A-League Women. Let's hear from Amy about what's coming up on Dubzone this week.
Coming up on Dubzone, the top six is all set. We break down the elation and the heartbreak following a chaotic weekend of action. Michelle Heyman brings up the double ton in style, but just how far can Canberra climb? And Holly Mack takes the lead in the Golden Boot race, but the Premier's Plate is still up in the air heading into the final weekend. Teo and Teresa join me again. What a crazy weekend it was. Plenty of highs and lows. What was your favourite?
My favourite moment was seeing Canberra United's reaction to securing their final spot.
We'll do some post-mortem on the teams knocked out, the permutations for who's still alive. So much to get our teeth into on this one.
Plenty of excitement still to come in the final round of the Ninja A-League. That's all ahead on Dubzone, available on the A-League's website, app and YouTube channels, plus 10Play.
Tommy, let's rip into extra time to finish off, mate. We'll start with, what are the three biggest fixtures remaining in this season?
I found it really hard to narrow down to three. I think two of them are this weekend. Obviously, Victory against Auckland this weekend is going to be a huge game, and Western Sydney Wanderers against Melbourne City. Those two games will go a long way to deciding the fate of what the top of the table looks like, and obviously that will, change what the finals picture immensely for every club. So I think that they're the two obvious ones that come to mind. And last round of the season, Western United against Auckland and Melbourne City against Sydney FC. I know that's 4 games, but I couldn't break that into 3. They're the 4 games.
Yeah, well, I couldn't get past 6. So there's a few belters to come. And 3 that I had on the last Saturday of the league. So that's a good day to sit on the couch if you can't get to one of the games and just indulge in the A-Liga. Let's hear as well, just quickly, from what Israel had to say about young players in the A-League at the moment.
Well, first thing, it's brilliant that we're getting our players poached and they're getting sold for money. That's the first thing that wasn't happening before. But what's happened now is that the young ones know that, and agents know that then they want to go very quickly. So normally you spend 1, 2, 3 seasons and then you go overseas. Now it's like 6, 7, 8 games and then they're already looking to go overseas. So it's a little bit different in the strategy now. Like, you can't just bring young ones through because they might go very quickly, and then so it's a little bit different.
Tommy, quick reaction to that?
I don't disagree with him, but I think that's just the reality of football these days. You see all the big clubs overseas, Ajax, for example, they have a similar problem, and it's on the clubs to create that conveyor belt so that when one leaves, the next one's just there, ready to come through and step into the first team.
Have Adelaide United made a mistake in announcing that Carl Viet won't be around next season while they're still in contention?
Yes. I think that, we've seen teams at the bottom of the ladder do that, and it's not surprising because there's nothing really to play for, but they're a team that their season's still well and truly alive. So I think the timing of that is quite perplexing.
Agree. Tommy, does Marco Tilio remind you of Eden Hazard? And I ask you this because on Football Tonight on 10, he was asked about which player he idolised, and he gave the usual, I think he said Messi and all that, but he also said, because he's a Chelsea fan, Eden Hazard. And it certainly got our producer Nick Stoll thinking, there's a bit of that about him. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the way he kind of dribbles at speed and short steps, mobile, I think there is a little bit of similarities, but I think Eden Hazard was more a player that could hold the ball up too, obviously with his big legs, would get his body in. I think that Tilio is not one to... He likes to avoid the physical confrontation, I think.
If he could be half the player that Hazard was, that would be outstanding for the Socceroos, Tommy. Happy days, mate. Thanks for your contribution this week, brother.
Pleasure.
Appreciate
Great show.
We'll see you next week on Total A-Leagues.